Hi there, I'm Alistair Atkin for the Atkin Guitars YouTube channel. Today we're going to do a comparison video about two very popular guitars that we make, the D37 and the OM37. And in this video I'm going to talk about the differences between these two guitars, and then we're going to get Paul in and we're going to have a little play with these guitars and discuss what we both feel about them. So without further ado, here we go. These two guitars have been models that we've made for nearly 30 years, and I would say the two of them have become two of our most popular models. And there's a good reason for that. A Dreadnought is probably the most famous guitar shape in the world, and you'll have seen that and heard it on so many recordings throughout the history of pop and rock and country music. And the OM, again, is another classic that so many people have used for in the studio. Clapton used a very similar model on his Unplugged videos and recordings. So both of these are considered to be real classic models. But I think it's worth us looking at this and working out what differences there are between the two. There's some obvious differences, and then there's probably some more subtle sides to this which perhaps people don't think about. So I'm hoping this video might help you make a decision as to which way you'd like to go with one of these. There's never a better way of making a decision about a guitar than getting the guitars in your hand and playing each one of them. I'll tell you what we'll do first. We'll go through the D37 and we'll get familiar with what the guitar's made of and some of the specs. And then we'll look at the OM in the same way. A little bit of history about the Dreadnought. The first one was made in 1916, which was a 12 fretter. And then over the next couple of decades, it evolved into a 14 fretter, and that was the one that really became popular. That's the golden era of the Dreadnought, would widely be considered to be sort of 30s and 40s. And that's what this is based on. A big part of that is the herringbone border on the outside there. Is obviously aesthetic, but the way this guitar worked, it was such a big sound. And the name came from the battleship, the Dreadnought, which was the biggest battleship in the fleet of the American Navy. So it was a real sort of heavy hitter. It wasn't until the 1960s that this guitar became a really popular instrument, and with the likes of Neil Young and Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Paul Simon and a myriad of other artists beginning to use these in sort of everyday modern sort of folk rock music, and I think that's when it sort of rocketed into another stratosphere really. And those recordings became revered by everybody, and those classic Dreadnought sounds were captured at that moment. So that's a little bit of history as to why this guitar is so popular. If you were to look from a build side, there's a few things going on here. It became one of the first instruments to have the X-brace on it, which again changed the sound of the acoustic guitar. Before that, there was ladder bracing. This is a stronger sort of bracing system, and there's also scalloped bracing inside this, and all of our guitars have scalloped bracing on the X-brace and on the two transverse braces that move in this direction. So typically a Dreadnought is 15 3/4 across the bottom bout, and the depth in mil, which for some reason I've got this sort of, I'm of that generation where I carry half of my measurements in inches and half in millimeters, but 125 millimeters. We bake all of our tops and all of our braces. That's to really concentrate on getting the ultimate stability so that this guitar can go into any environment and be as stable as possible. Acoustic guitars are renowned for having problems moving in and out of different humidity and temperatures. So you have to try to do your best to combat any future problems. And to be honest, there's no way that any maker on earth can make sure that a guitar will stand up in every environment, but you can do as much as you can to negate that as possible before you start building. So the back and sides are Indian rosewood, which again, is a classic wood for this type of guitar. The original guitars would have had Brazilian rosewood, but that's so hard to come across now that we don't even get involved with that. But Indian rosewood is still a fantastic tone wood, and I would challenge people to tell the difference between Indian and Brazilian in a blind test. Never feel like you're being undersold anything when you're buying decent quality Indian rosewood. And I personally take the view that Indian rosewood can look great if it's wide grained or if it's, closer grained. It doesn't have to be that straight for me either. It can have some wave to it and some different colour. But the stuff that we pick, I stand behind as being perfectly good quality, as I do with our Sitka tops. They're not exactly the stuff of picture postcards, and they look like they've actually grown out of a tree. A lot of modern guitar makers will use perfect grain, and to me, I like to see something that looks real. Traditionally, these guitars had ebony bridges and fingerboards, and we use that as well. It's incredibly durable. It's one of those woods that when you polish it, it looks really has a real luster about it, so it can look really slick. Not all makers will go to the nth degree and make a bridge look as perfect as that. I like to sort of show off that luster, and the way we do that is by sanding to 600 grit and then polishing on a machine. And I think that transforms a piece of ebony and rosewood actually if you're using fingerboards and bridges, but it gives it that luster and it gives it that vintage feel. It makes it look like it's been played for a real long time. Our inlays on our fretboards are mother of pearl. We make all of the pearl in-house, and I think that's something that we've really enjoyed getting involved with, because certainly during COVID it became a lot more difficult for people to get hold of these parts, and everything slowed down, so it became important for us to be able to control this because it would stop production. All of our pearl works are now made on a little tiny CNC machine which we program ourselves, and all the drawings, which means that when we inlay these into the ebony, the slots we've made for the ebony are really great fitting things. So we're not reliant on other manufacturers to make those parts for us. And I think that's really quite important. If you look at the back of the neck, we use an African mahogany neck, which is all one piece. For how long we can do that, I'm not sure, but it's still available to us, and we make a real big effort to make sure that we use all of that wood. So typically out of a sort of billet, you'll get 2 necks, and the middle part of that will make parts of the guitar like the neck block. And so they all come from the same pieces of wood, which again is a nice thing for a guitar to have all the way through it. So the headstock on this we carve in-house, and it's got a really nice volute on it. That sort of attention to detail takes some time. We make a really big point of sharpening these joints up ourselves and these carves. Some makers will cut corners and they won't go and do that final carve, and it really notices on the final instrument, and I think that's something that we're pretty proud of. Again, the heel is slick, it's not too big. There's as much heel as there needs to be there in order for it to sort of work well. There's not too much weight about it. Those again are small things that we notice and we put a lot of effort into getting right. When you see the wrong heels on these guitars, it looks completely out of whack. So the whole guitar is bound in Ivoroid, and again that is vintage appropriate. And it's got that really nice, slightly creamy feel with a bit of grain in it. Now I should point out here that Ivoroid is not ivory. It's a celluloid plastic that we use to bind these guitars. We don't use any ivory on our instruments at all. And down the back of the guitar, on all of our 37s, you'll get this zipper effect made up of loads of individual blocks. It comes out of a long block, and then they're just glued together to make this back strip. So again, that is really vintage appropriate. Our headstocks on these are Indian rosewood. We choose to use a decal on these. I think there's something really quite smart about a decal when it's done really well. They can look really, really sophisticated. A lot of people will use mother of pearl for their inlays and their logos. We use it on some of our instruments, but because the originals of these didn't have a pearl logo, I feel like it's nice to use the decal. And I think I'm pretty proud of our logo and the way our decals look. It has a certain Art Deco feel about it, which fits in with this era of guitar, I think. We make all of our pick guards in-house. So this is a tortoiseshell pick guard. We've cut it out on the laser machine and we've beveled the edges and polished it up. And again, there's a good video on our channel if you want to watch how we do that. We put a lot of time into making great pick guards. The saddle is bone, as is the nut. These are all made in-house by hand. And as the guitar goes through its final setup, the plec machine cuts the slots for the string spacing here and also the heights. So it's absolutely optimum size in that respect. So we use a Goto open back tuner, again, vintage style. We age those in-house as well to give it that sort of nice old feel about it, which is in keeping with the whole feel of the instrument. If you've not heard of Atkin guitars, a big thing that you need to know about is our aged finish. I think this has been one of the main reasons why our company has really sort of made waves, because no one had actually used an aged finish on an acoustic guitar before we did, I don't think. And a few people have had inroads into it, but for the last sort of 15 years, this has been our standard finish. We used mirror finishes for quite a long time from nitrocellulose, but this has become what people are asking for. And here's the reasons. Nitrocellulose is still considered to be one of the best tonal finishes that there is. The way it's applied and the way it ages and the thinness of it is a massive part of that. But when you do an aged finish like ours, you use a lot less nitrocellulose than any standard nitrocellulose finish. A high gloss version of this with a flat mirror finish could possibly have 20 or 24 coats on it, whereas this would have 8 or 9. And that plays a massive part in the weight of an instrument. If you were to carry that liquid in a bottle, you'd notice a huge difference there. So this thin nitro finish really helps the guitar move. It also ages really nicely. So, you know, what are you going to do when you get a brand new guitar? At some point, you're going to bash it or scratch it. So a nitrocellulose finish, as it ages, starts to look really quite special. So I think that's something that initially you don't realise, but as it sort of becomes your own instrument, those little marks that you get on it are something that you don't need to worry about. Another side of that is that our cellulose finish will age quicker than any standard poly guitar out there, but it will look really nice, and something you don't need to worry about is those little marks. So all of our guitars are set up on our plec machine. That machine will shoot the fingerboard and register what the neck looks like before the frets go in. And once the frets have gone in and the guitar is under tension, it will re-measure the whole fingerboard and the frets and the heights, and it will tell you exactly what needs to happen to that. And then we'll go in and the plec will do its work and get all the fret heights perfect, as it will also cut the slots in the nut and the heights. So it really does quite an amazing job of getting the best playing action that you can get. So now we're going to look at the OM37. The OM37, people have heard me say this a lot, but I look at it as the desert island guitar because you can do so much with it. But we'll go through it and you'll get to see what I'm talking about. So historically, the OM was a guitar that was built for a banjo player who wanted to replace the banjo, and he wanted a 14 fret neck joint. And this was to be used in a jazz orchestra. So that's where it came from. But so much more has happened to this guitar since then. and it's been used by countless blues artists, folk artists, singer-songwriters. It's become a very, very popular instrument. So the guitar, in comparison to the Dreadnought, the width of the guitar is 15 inches across compared to 15 3/8 of the Dreadnought. And the depth is 105 millimeters compared to 125. So that's a good sort of 20 mil or an inch shallower than a Dreadnought. So automatically it's a smaller guitar. The reason for doing a comparison is that by no means does the OM sound like a small guitar when you play it. So a lot of people are asking for a rich, powerful, bold sound. Well, in my experience, an OM still delivers that. Something to also bear in mind that they actually have the same neck on both. So the OM neck and the Dreadnought neck have all the same measurements. It's the same nut width, which is 43 mil here and 55 mil at the 14th fret, and both have 55 mil spacing on the bridge. So it's worth saying now that you can order at no extra charge a 45 mil nut or a 43 mil nut on a Dreadnought or an OM. As with the Dreadnought, it has the Sitka spruce top, the Indian rosewood back and sides, the ebony bridge and fingerboard, African mahogany neck with the same carved volute, Indian rosewood head veneer with the Atkin decal logo, Goto tuners that have been aged in-house. It has the zipper on the back. It also has ivoroid binding throughout, and it's got the all-important herringbone round the border. These have a slightly smaller pickguard, which again has been made in-house out of celluloid, tortoiseshell celluloid. They have a smaller sound hole. So a Dreadnought has a 120 mil sound hole, and the OM has a 97 mil sound hole. So that's going to change the way the sound is delivered out of the guitar as well. So when we get to playing these, we'll have a chat about what we feel that might do. The OM37 also has our aged nitro finish throughout, and as with the D37, they both have a double action truss rod, which is accessible through the sound hole. There's a little video about how to adjust our truss rods. You can find that on our channel as well. I've covered most of these features in the D37 segment of this video. It's pretty much the same combination of woods. It's just a different shape and a different size. Bracing wise, it still has the X brace inside, and they're scalloped. The bracing is slightly thinner. So our standard top bracing on a D37 would be 8 mil thick and about 15 mil high. And on this, it would be 7 mil thick and 13 mil high. So there's a few little differences. The back braces are slightly thinner on an OM to the Dreadnought. It's sort of scaled down to cope with the size of the instrument so that it still allows that instrument to perform at its optimum. We're going to have a listen to both of these now. So this is Paul. You may have seen him on our channel. Paul works here, does all the sales, but he's also a brilliant guitarist. So I'm going to play a little bit and you'll play a little bit.
I'll play a bit.
We'll discuss what we think about these guitars. So Paul's got the D37 and I've got the OM37. I mean, what you're feeling, do you lean towards an OM or a D? Have you got a preference?
I've got a mixture of both. I think I like the comfort of an OM.
Yeah.
For like this scenario on a sofa, obviously.
Yeah.
And also, I find it more comfortable anyway for my back.
Yeah, that's actually a big part of this. And I used to play Dreadnoughts all the time. And I think this is quite common, isn't it? Yeah. Like this shoulder sort of collapsing thing that the back of your shoulder starts to really hurt after a number of years playing. So as much as I loved playing Dreadnoughts, I ended up just thinking I need a smaller guitar. And so for me, the OM became the go-to because it doesn't feel small, but no. It's just comfortable, but while still having quite a powerful sound, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think when you're sitting down, you notice it more than standing.
Look, look, I'll play a G. I'm using a plectrum. I'm using a Gibson USA medium plectrum. I think sometimes hearing guitars with plectrums helps, but the G is always the good chord to try. So. Yeah. So automatically, there's a difference here in the bass coming out of that, and although this isn't a quiet guitar, you can definitely hear there's more bass coming out, and you would expect that from a bigger guitar.
I mean, that would be more mid-range focused.
Yeah.
This one, like you say, slightly heavier pick, but it's only an 88, so it's between medium and what you call a heavy pick.
Yeah.
But I'm not hitting it hard.
No. And if you give it a bit more of a pelt. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Automatically, when you hit that harder, you do notice it's got that real classic Dreadnought sound.
Yeah.
But I would also say, if you didn't have the Dreadnought to hand, you'd sit with this and you wouldn't find it quiet. So
no.
It's kind of one of these things. It's very difficult to sort of get that message across to people. And finger picking wise, if you were. Well, if you look at finger picking as a thing, a lot of people choose a smaller guitar to finger pick with, don't they?
It's nice and articulate.
It is, and yet you've got so many examples of brilliant finger pickers who use exactly that guitar.
Yeah.
And if you were to look at the likes of Joni Mitchell, Stephen Stills, Lyle Lovett, Paul Simon, they've all used them as finger pickers.
Yeah.
Although if you go into a guitar shop and say, would you like I'd like a finger picking guitar, they wouldn't necessarily offer you a Dreadnought straight away.
We'll go to that as a default thing, wouldn't they, sometimes?
Yeah, so to me that's like it doesn't really make sense.
No.
But there is something nice about a smaller guitar for finger picking, sort of more intimate. You can get round it a bit more maybe. So yeah, again, I don't think we're going to come up with a kind of.
I think the answer is buy both.
You have to buy both, don't you? Paul's a much better guitarist than me, so play a bit more on that guitar.
Shall we stay on the finger picking for now?
Go for it. Well, do you want to try it on this and see if we can pick up any sort of what the differences might be?
Remember what?
So lovely. Well done, Paul.
I'm not hearing that.
No, but that's what my question was going to be. So when you're playing both, what were you experiencing from this compared to that? Can you put that into words?
I think with the finger picking, I mean, that carries more volume, which is nice, but I do like the balance of this for finger picking.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I think that carries itself a bit more naturally. It naturally leans itself to that style.
With that flat picking thing, I mean, that's why so many bluegrassers use these, isn't it? A bigger Dreadnought size.
and that was still selecting and isolating notes with a pick. And I suppose if you was just strumming, that's another style to do it, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just this still a great sounding. There's still nice depth there.
And weirdly, once you've stopped playing one of the guitars and you start, you get used to it. So it's kind of like one isn't better than the other in some respects. So they're just different. I mean, from sitting here and hearing it out front, you definitely notice this has more sort of wallop, as it should do. Yeah. But at the same time, that isn't quiet. And
no, you're not sacrificing or compromising too much at all.
No, which you would think on such a sort of different size guitar that you might actually feel that they did sound and perform differently. But yeah, there's something about it. It doesn't seem to sort of lack too much. No. Okay, so I think what my summing up of that is both sound good. Agreed. Probably if you wanted to be a flat picker in a bluegrass band, you'd choose this. If you're a singer-songwriter, and maybe if you're playing by yourself, you'll choose that. Yeah. I don't know. Have you got any more to take home than that? I mean,
no. I think for the purpose of a tool, like creating music and songs and so on, indoors, yeah, it's for me. Like I say, the comfort thing, perfect. Yeah. Long term, if I'm playing a long time, this for me sort of ticks a lot of boxes. Yeah. And it isn't too tunnel vision, maybe.
No. Interesting. So yeah, if you liked our video, please like and subscribe. We're finding a lot of people are watching the channel, but they're maybe not subscribing, and that subscribing thing is so important because it helps the algorithm get to the point where more people see what we're doing. So it's important for us. You might not care, but it would really help us. So thank you if you can do that. Also, comments. Let us know what you think of these videos. It really helps us know what other videos to make. So if you can give us some idea of what you liked about a video or what you'd like to see us do in the next video, more comparison videos. If you think this video is too long or boring, let us know. We don't mind hearing whatever you've got to say. We're just trying to do our best here and give you an idea about what we do. You've been watching Atkin Guitars. Please check out some of our other videos.